Hello everyone, welcome to the channel again. I wanted to take a second and talk about a simple tool which I kind of have up here on the screen called Unfurl. Now this is very useful in that it allows us to take a URL that we might be interested in and kind of break it out a little bit in a way that diagrams it and makes it a bit more understandable. And I love this for fast analysis and also for just if you have to parse through a large number of these and you want to see common points across, say, a bunch of different URLs, Unfurl becomes very useful because it breaks things out for you nicely. And again, as like always, I believe in examples as the best way to teach. So we're going to do a couple of examples here together. They have actually a list of examples that really illustrate everything you can do with it because it's a little bit more than just URLs. But let's start with those. So underneath their generate URLs, they have a couple of very cool examples here. So let's start with a simple one here like they have with example.com. I'll go ahead and give that a click and then you'll see it'll unfurl it. And this is where the magic in Unfurl really shines. So this is the URL that we gave them. You can see here it starts unfurling and breaking everything out. That's what all these U's and these lines are. So it tells you what the scheme is, it tells you what the domain is. It gives you the top level domain piece, which is a .com. And if you mouse over it, actually gives you information. Like it tells you this is the base or the registrable part. Here's the subdomain. So that breaks down this first part. Then you get into the path. So it talks about the URL parsing here. It gives you path 1 segment, segment 2, and then it gives you the file name and the extension. So it kind of breaks each part of this down. And here it talks about the query or the parameters that were passed. It breaks them into A and B. Again, this is a very simple example, but if you had 100 of these and you were laying them out and you were trying to measure and look at the things that were in common across 100 URLs, you might put each one of these in a column and say, okay, does it match the same general schema? Do I have, for example, example.com followed by path, followed by index, passing both variable A and variable B, or some combination that looks a lot like that? And you can look for patterns that way. In fact, that's a chief use of it. Let's jump back here and look at another one. Let's look at something a little more complicated, like this one here. Now this one, it is a bit more complicated, as it said. Let me zoom in just a hair here. So you see there's the schema, and then of course you get the username, password, and then the host where it's going, and you get the subdomain of that and its actual domain, what port that's involved. And this part here is Unfurl, so I know it's using the same name, but it's actually inside of this URL. So this kind of breaks it out. Now I don't really think that's a super more complicated version, so let's dig at a couple of things here. Magnetic links are kind of interesting because if you follow files, magnetic links can contain a ton of information to help you understand where they're being sourced, what's the expectations behind the magnetic links, who's servicing them, and so forth. So this can be a big topic if you're not familiar with torrents and how torrents are seeded and how they're handled. But if you follow this, it breaks out the magnetic pieces for you and tells you what the address is, how it explodes, what that means, and breaks each one down that is part of this. There's the web seed, there's the exact source, there's the exact topic. So you can use this and actually break this down and kind of follow magnetic links. I was going to go through this, but I realized it's actually quite a big topic. But simply, when you have a magnetic link like this, it's defining the locations, the keywords, and the source of both the trackers that are following it and where the seed is at and how you can access it. So you can kind of play around with this. Now this can be saved, or you can take a snap or whatever you want to do, or you can pull different pieces out. It's kind of up to you. And you can also drag and drop this. So this is a little interactive, so you can move things around. Though it does force some things to stay in their own tier, like I can't drag that up or down. It's specifically right there. So, but I like Unfurl for this reason here, because it breaks things out. And if you're a beginner, sometimes seeing short links or links like this can be very daunting to try to understand everything that's in play. So this is, to me, a more classic and good example because this is a short link. That's what this t.co is. And it can help you understand, like this part you've probably got, but this part here maps to this particular expanded URL. And so it actually follows this for you and expands it out. Follows, there's the bit.ly link, here's the bit.ly piece, when it was created, what it actually expands to, and then of course all its breakdown and schema as well, even including its UUID. Now you can take this UUID and you could actually put it in something like here and have it further expanded out. You can see that here, where if you take a UUID and actually feed it to Unfurl, it can break it out for you to understand version, time generated, MAC address that was generated from, who the vendor was, and so forth. So you can kind of play with those as well. It doesn't do it all in one, so you'd have to find the UUID and then look for it. Here's another UUID example, where it kind of, it was just the one that we saw earlier. It's a version 4, so it doesn't have all that information embedded in it. So search engines, you can see here, let's do one of those as an example. Here's DuckDuckGo, kind of breaks things down for you. Not really all that exciting, but I want you to see that you can actually feed this a couple of things. Here's Twitter. Let's do Twitter since that's common. So we have this status update. It breaks it all down for us, including telling us what the timestamps are, so you know what date that actually was made, what machine ID, and so on. That it came from a web source. So those can be very useful when you're tracking down links. I'll skip the rest. We did IDs already. Let's do TikTok, since that's kind of a popular thing these days. From a TikTok ID, you can actually get timestamp data and figure out the time it was actually recorded or posted. For encodings, you can feed like base64 to Unfurl, like this base64 here, and it will break it down and tell you what that actually means. As you can see here, we'll bust it out for you. So if you've got unknown base64, things you think are base64, you can use Unfurl to kind of try to break that, or you can put it in Cybersecurity, which I've talked about earlier, and use Cybersecurity to kind of break it out. Unfurl makes it a little neater because you can actually grab something and go, hey, what is this? And kind of have it help you understand what's going on. In fact, let me give it here's an example. It's not base64, but just a separate example. This one's a little more interesting because it has a URL inside of a URL. You see here it's got the bssa.edu.ru in this part here, but you see it's got a go-to, so it's got kind of its own custom redirect. And it's telling you where it's going to, which is a Vietnamese source. Looking at a calendar, I would suspect based on the naming, but who knows. Let me get back to Unfurl here. You can do more than just base64. There's different types. I did this with Proto. Let's do this version here. This is a zip, so it looks like you can actually not get too terrible much, but it can be useful there. And it just kind of goes on. You can break out timestamps and so forth. So Unfurl is very simple in its use, very simple in what it's meant to do. Actually, let me see. I have another example here which has got a UUID, and I want to make a point real quick. You'll notice I'm putting in HTTP or HTTPS when I do this. If you remove that and you try to look at a URL, it will not do anything. It absolutely has to know if it's HTTP or HTTPS, or else it really won't unfurl it properly. That helps it understand what schema to apply. So if you do this and it's not working for you, please check that. That could be the first thing that's going wrong. So in this case, it broke it out for us. You see here CMDD tells us that's path segment 1, path segment 2. Here's the UUID, and then it got here. Out of curiosity, if we pull this out, will this unfurl this UUID? No, it won't give us anything else. Okay. If it doesn't have the capability to understand it, it won't do anything. So there's more to this site if you want to look on dfer.blog, but I use it primarily for this right here, this Unfurl piece, mainly to tear apart URLs to kind of understand their pieces and parts really quickly, very simply. And then aside from that, I will use it to really get into IDs if I have them, so I can try to understand more of them, or a little bit on encoding, especially if I get a strange encoding. Sometimes I'll get longer URLs like this one. Let me go ahead and put this front on it. It's got this one from Better Buys. So if they're really long, I like to chop them up. If I need to take a quick snapshot, I can zoom in and snap. If I just want to see everything busted up, this allows me to do so a little bit and understand what's going on. Like knowing that this is a randomly generated UUID is kind of useful. It's version 4. That helps me understand potentially the sourcing of this, and I can kind of gather a little bit of intelligence from what I'm looking at. So just a quick, again, overview, and that's the point of these tool introductions is, what is this tool? How do I use it? When do I use it? So again, as a repeat, Unfurl is to break apart and let you look at the pieces and parts of different URLs. It's very useful when you have a list of URLs and you're trying to understand all of the complex parts of one. If you had a very simplex URL, like if we cropped all this off and this is all we had, is, say this, that's not very complex necessarily. So I wouldn't necessarily come here to look at it, and I definitely wouldn't necessarily come to look at one that looked like this because I don't need to. They're too simplistic. But when you have very complex ones and you're trying to track variables, trying to understand the parts of the URL to see if it matches other ones, Unfurl can be a quick jump to help you understand things really fast. This is open source. You can actually keep this locally in case you don't want to put things online, and it can become a very useful resource. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and this introduction to Unfurl. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you like our channel, please follow us and like and subscribe. Thanks.